Hello, class. We're here for the Chapter 9 wrap-up video. I figured I was gonna do this in my Halloween costume, so hopefully I get this video posted by Halloween. Uh, Professor Scooby-Doo here, and we got our little guest, Scrappy Doo, here today. So today we're gonna be talking about political ideology. Okay. Now this is one of the longer chapters as well. Obviously, I'll focus on the main ones that exist within American politics: liberalism and conservatism. But some of the other ones will come up. So we'll talk about socialism, communism in this chapter, anarchism, and then you'll have a survey to take as an assignment, and it'll kind of put you, it'll align you where you stand on the political spectrum. So, ideology, what is it? Okay. It's a belief system, can also be used as an action component. It is essentially going to be all your values kind of bundled up. So, those values that we talked about in chapter 8. So, what influences your guys' values? Okay. In this class, you've probably heard the terms conservative, liberal, left leaning, right leaning. This spectrum right here can kind of help it all make a little bit more sense. Essentially, as you are on the left side of the spectrum, you tend to be more open to social issues, a little bit more progressive. If you're on the right, you tend to be more old school and reserved, or what is called conservative. Now, American politics exists within this box, okay, and it's the box between liberalism and conservatism, okay. Within that box, freedom actually exists, or like this table over here likes to show you, this graphic, democracy. As you get to the extreme versions of this spectrum, okay, so further left or further right, it either leads to its dictatorship or slavery. Here's an example of some politicians who might be liberal or conservative. Bernie Sanders would be a liberal, okay? He actually calls himself a democratic socialist, so he'd be more liberal than the, I would say, typical person who is left leaning, okay? On the other side, we have Mitch McConnell. You might have seen some videos on him. They asked him his opinions on ice, and he actually fell down. He's also notorious for having strokes on air. He's very old, and his health isn't really the best. So he would be an example of a conservative or a right-wing politician. Okay, he would actually be a little bit further down as a right-wing politician. He's gotten a little bit more extreme over time. So um, now you should know that ideology, how it should can be described. Optimism versus pessimism. We talked about this in the very first chapter of the book. We talked about Thomas Hobbes and John Locke, and then fixed and flexible. We didn't really talk too much about that. Now, fixed is more of you have a predetermined thinking. It is either black or white. Dynamic is you allow maybe some details to kind of influence you to have a little bit more flexibility when you're looking at issues in the world. Remember, there's no right or wrong answer right here when it comes to ideology. Okay, it is all preference. Everyone's values are going to be a little bit differently. When you take that survey, don't be alarmed or be like, "Oh, is like this a good result? Is this a bad result?" It's something that might change throughout your life. Okay, so just maybe you get identified as conservative for this when you take the survey this time. Next time you might be liberal, you might be moderate, you might be politically disengaged. Okay, there's no right or wrong answer. It's just kind of how you view the world or social issues. Okay, um, it just talks about James Madison, Thomas Jefferson. These are just some generalizations on how maybe a liberal person might define something in comparison to conservative. Your textbook does a very good job of doing this. So like all of this, you don't really need to write it down, but these are like generalizations of what on how they stand on like moral regulatory policy, crime policy, the economy, national security. And it's kind of interesting because they like to pick and choose like when to be, I guess, big on government and then small on government. So that's kind of like when we talk about ideology being used as an action component, you could be like, oh well, I'm fiscally conservative, okay, or socially I'm liberal, okay, and then the other set would just be just defining your ideology. Now, you do need to know the two different types of conservative ideologies they talk about in your textbook. It's going to be traditional and modern. Modern is going to be the more extreme version. So if we were on the political spectrum, it would be further right. And then there's going to be minor differences between them, and that's kind of what changes them. So on change, ideology, and how government should actually function. Now, traditional conservatives dated from the 1930s and 60s, modern conservatives 1960s to today. Um, in the 1930s and 60s, you'll notice that both traditional and then classical liberalism, they're actually very close together. So you'll notice during this time period, where actually this box in which, remember, democracy and freedom exists, we were actually more united as a nation, or maybe it was a little bit easier for us to find middle ground. As we spread out amongst the political spectrum, so as people become more radicalized, it is much tougher for us to have conversations or to find middle ground. Okay. Once again, a good example of this is you and your family trying to figure out something to eat. Okay, if very easy decision to make because it's a small group of individuals. Remember, diversity isn't really too much of an issue, and the size isn't too much of an issue. Population. Once you add more people into that group and people start straying further away from the middle, it is much harder for us to find middle ground. Now, this you should know the definition of conservatism. What does it mean? It just means protecting traditional beliefs. That's why I say they're more old school. Typically, traditional or conservatives tend to be more religious. Now, they're not always against change. Sometimes they just prefer small or incremental change. Modern conservatives, which are the more radical, the more extreme version, they're actually going to be on the side where they would rather go to the like the founders' understanding of politics. So they might actually be for maybe no change at all. I think this is where like the term "Make America Great Again" is kind of coined from. It is from this shift to maybe being a more radical conservative. Okay, so being further along the lines because conservatives have gone further right just as liberals have gone further left. And once again, they've this box in which democracy and freedom exist has now widened out. Okay. Now they do this to offset each other. Okay. They're always going to say, hey, the other side is going further that way. So in order to counteract that and keep the middle in the middle rather than having to shift this way or shift this way as a nation, we need to make sure it's fair. So that is why we have terms like this. Okay, going back to the founders' understanding of politics, where you're going to see with the liberal side, maybe to be even more progressive or shift for more radical change or an overhaul of the system. Here are my examples of SpongeBob characters, okay? I would say Sandy Cheeks would be a traditional conservative, very fitting because she's from Texas, and most people from Texas tend to be conservative. Now, I don't think Sandy is opposed to all change because obviously she's a scientist and she's living underneath the sea to do some research, okay? Um, Fish on the bottom are from the SpongeBob movie, so these are the like the redneck ones on the way out of Bikini Bottom. Those are the types of fish that would probably storm the Capitol. Okay, so you could classify them as more of the modern conservative. Okay, they're going to be more extreme. They're more likely to have a lifted truck. They're going to be, like, we need to go back to the good old days. Those are the types of fish that you would see right there. Now, this is just once again some more generalizations, kind of like how we've shifted over time. You don't really need to know too much about this. Now, liberalism, there's two different strands that we'll talk about: classical and modern. So, classical liberalism and um, traditional conservatives were very closely aligned. Okay, there was only very minor differences, and then obviously, once again, between classical and modern, there's minor differences as well. So you'll notice some of these ideologies, especially when we get into the more specific ones, there's like real niche like differences. So if you were to take that survey, say you went back and you took it again and you changed like two of your answers, okay? Maybe even one of your answers. You might actually get a completely different result, okay? And those questions are not easy to solve, by the way. Like they're real hard. It'll ask you, what are your opinions on like animal abuse or what values do you think children should have? What are your opinions on Donald Trump? Where do you rank yourself on a social ladder? Um, they're not really like simple questions like yes, no. So, when you make those decisions, just know that one or two questions being changed could be the difference between you being further left on the spectrum, further right, or maybe even being in the middle. Okay. But your textbook defines liberalism placing more value on order or on freedom or liberty rather than order. Okay. You should know all five of these ideas right here. So these five ideas come from philosopher John Locke, who we talked about earlier in the semester. And this is the ideas in which classical liberalism is rooted in. So the first three are we've talked about the social contract theory and property rights. First three: reason, individualism, and liberty. So reason, we have empathy towards one another. Okay, so we can actually understand each other. This one ideology has more of a positive outlook on individuals. Now, individualism. So liberals tend to be more open socially, so they're kind of pushing towards people to kind of express themselves. Okay, so because of that, they don't want to be held back by like outdated traditions. Okay. Um, Moving forward, you should know all the three differences. The three differences are going to come with equality, liberty, and income security. So this is where modern liberalism, which is more extreme, so it'd be further left down the political spectrum. Now, this type of they're going to push more for social movements. Okay, so like anything that has to do with race, gender, sexuality, or a specific niche group of people, they're trying to kind of even the playing field. Now, when it comes to liberty, it's using law to protect civil liberties, so government protect you from government. The last thing is going to be using policy to pass social welfare programs, and this is kind of a current event right now because we actually see that food stamps are going to run out as of November 1st, and they're not going to use emergency funding because once again, we're still in a government shutdown. Now, classical versus modern liberals, we're going to use the SpongeBob references once again. I use this fancy SpongeBob as the classical one because there's, remember, not too far off from being maybe a traditional conservative. And then the imagination box episode, I think, is the perfect way to describe the modern liberal because anything can happen in the imagination box. And you would say that the modern liberal is kind of pushing for um, maybe an extreme version or rapid change, which is not bad, by the way. They just think that is how we should kind of carry ourselves within our government because it helps people freely express themselves. Now, libertarians, okay, this is going to be very minimal government, okay? So goes based off of the idea that we should just let things be. Now, it goes based off a harm principle guide, which you should know as well. Now, this harm principle guide for limited government means that government should only intervene when you're preventing individuals from being harmed physically, okay, or their property or their interests. So we don't want our government making rules that our parents would make. Like our parents would tell us, don't eat unhealthy food, wear a seatbelt, wear a helmet, you shouldn't drink, you shouldn't smoke. Now, all of those behaviors right there, there's a few gray areas though, by the way. What libertarians would argue, government should not be involved in making rules on that because the only thing that those behaviors hurt are the person who is personally ingesting them. Now, some gray areas, smoking, obviously, right? Secondhand smoke is an issue. So libertarians would say, yeah, we do need to have laws for secondhand smoke to protect other people because now smoking is not just harming the person who is ingesting it, but it also might be harming the surrounding people. Drinking is another example of it. Libertarians say we shouldn't be banning, we shouldn't have prohibition, people banned from drinking. Okay, we should let them drink. However, they shouldn't be behind the wheel of a car because now they are putting other people in danger. Okay, so libertarians would just prefer to have more of a limited government because also they think people kind of know how to live with each other because they have more of a positive outlook. Here's my example. I didn't have a SpongeBob reference, so I just have a picture of a guy who wasn't wearing a seatbelt, and he was live getting interviewed during this picture. I found this picture like a long time ago. I think it's funny. It's in some South American country, just completely random that a journalist would go and ask this person what they're feeling in that moment. Socialism and communism. You should know who Karl Marx is, the most famous associate figure with the ideology. Now, socialism and communism, it's a good idea on paper or through books, through example, though, not really has not really worked out the best. Now, the way that socialism and communism works is they think with this ideology, through greater government regulation and control of the economy, you can promote equality because if people are equal in a financial sense, they will be equal when it comes to all types of issues. Now, this has never worked, okay? And this is kind of me going maybe a little bit off the rails of the book and kind of more into personal opinion, but there's instructors out there, there's students out there that believe that socialism and communism would work. I think it can in small groups of people that are not diverse once again. Now, is it still possible? No. I like using, once again, some examples at home. At home, are you guys able to fairly break up the pizza? You order pizza with your family. Does everyone get the same amount of slices? So socialism and communism is pretty much saying everyone should have the same exact thing. How about this? Are you guys breaking up chores at the house evenly, fairly? Do you guys split bills up in the house fairly, evenly, completely evenly? Everyone's paying their exact fair share, the same share, no matter whether you're 10, you're 15, you're 30, you're 64, it doesn't matter. If you can't achieve that in your house, you will not be able to achieve it with hundreds of thousands of people or millions of people that are coming from different religious, different ethnic backgrounds. It's not really going to be too hard. It's going to be very hard to achieve. Now, some other famous leaders that are associated with the Joseph Stalin, Vladimir Lenin, Fidel Castro, Mao Zedong, all come from communist governments which have all failed. The only success story here, and mind you, all these countries pretty much fit the build of small population or maybe like not the greatest population and also not really all that diverse. The only success story you really see here is China. All the other ones have failed because once again, communism ends up on one of the extreme sides of the political spectrum, so where it leads to a dictatorship or slavery. Now, um, China being the lone one up there, it's because they run their economy a little bit differently. So they have a lot of government regulation. However, um, they still believe in a free market, which has allowed them to be kind of powerful on a global scale. Now, what you should know from this slide, obviously, is within a communist government, there is no separation between the public and the private sector. Everything is government owned, so there is not really too much freedom at all. There is a lot of order. This would be like the exact opposite of what libertarians would want, because libertarians want little government control. Now, the fantasy of communism is it's a bunch of free money. We're able to redistribute things. Everyone would be happy, kind of like the Pretty Patty episode. The reality of it, you could probably think of Lord of the Flies. If you guys have ever read the book, I want to say some people have actually wrote about it in one of the quick writes when talking about human nature. I like to use the Magic Conjure episode as an example. They weren't even in the woods for more than half a day, and they started going crazy because they couldn't properly ration things out or break things up. Also, with communism and socialism, even though I'm not saying that capitalism is the perfect solution for it, um, people are really incentivized to go out there and achieve things because there's financial gain out of it. Okay. Um, in communism, this doesn't really exist anymore. There's no drive because now people are going to be either heavily taxed because the playing field once again has to be even, and it has to be a lot more regulation. So therefore, there's not really too many motivating factors outside of you're doing things because you actually enjoy to do them. So, what does that mean for people who start corporations? What does that mean for people who go to medical school and want to become doctors? Like, you might be losing out on some individuals' drive to, I guess, be great as a country. Now, anarchism, this comes from the term without rulers. This is almost the complete opposite of communism because it means no government control at all. Now, anarchists would say that we need to let people choose to freely decide to be within a government or within some type of structure. Anarchists would say the only reason that you guys show up to school, the only reason that you pay your bills, the only reason that you go to work is because you feel forced to. You don't want to do it, but you do it because society says you should do it or you don't want to stand out. Okay? Now, why is this the problem? Okay? Anarchists said that people have good enough reason to kind of do what they best see as fit. Okay? And they shouldn't really feel coerced to act a certain way. I want you guys to think of like how you might act in school. You might not act like that at home. The only reason you act like that at school is because there might be a teacher in the room. Now, what happens when the principal walks in? Everyone kind of tightens up, right? Even your teacher sits up straight, everyone starts to get real serious. Is your teacher always as serious and as locked in as they are? And that's without the other, I guess, form of coercion in there? No. They act a little bit different. Same thing with police, right? Everyone's all fine on the road, bumping their music, hands off the wheel, checking their phone, no seatbelt on. But as soon as they see the cop car, they feel coerced to be obedient to the law and start to follow the law. Slow down, put your seatbelt on, lower your music, 12 and 6 on the wheel. You're only acting like that because you feel forced to. Okay, that is what anarchists would argue. True anarchists would be like the playground with no supervision. Now, I have to say no supervision because with supervision, kids aren't able to freely express themselves, okay? Some kids would want to just sit out on the dirt or on the grass. Some kids want to play with the wood chips. Some kids would prefer to play alone, play together. Now, if there's supervision out there, the kids might be forced to act a certain way or be forced to play with other kids that they don't want to, which is why it's not true anarchy. But without supervision, it would be the closest thing to anarchy that you guys can maybe understand. Populism. Now, this isn't right or left. This is one of more of those middle ideologies. It's more niche. Now, it's not really one I want to spend a lot of time on, so I'm going to kind of keep skipping it, but you should know what it is, okay? Feminism. This is the otherisms, this, terrorism, and environmentalism we'll go into, okay? Social political movement. This is going to be left leaning. All of these are that we're going to discuss right now. Aims at fighting for equal rights for women, okay? Now, there's theories, obviously. You can go to school for this and analyze gender differences and see how they stand in the world. A more traditional way of looking at the feminism is that males and females are separate in society. So not this goes against what the feminist theories are, and so they have different roles. I want to say on your survey it asks you that question as well. Obviously today, most younger people would say that no, we're all on the same equal footing. Doesn't matter if you're male, female, you can kind of achieve the same things. But there are still maybe some differences, such as like maybe the pay gap, maybe legal issues, social, economic, political. There's ways in which we vary. Once again, another SpongeBob example. Environmentalism. Okay, so this movement started with all the hippies and the tree huggers. Okay, You see the in the 70s, Earth Day is created. We find the Environmental Protection Agency. If you don't know what the EPA is, if you ever watched the SpongeBob movie, they're the ones that put the dome over Springfield. Okay, now and with good reason. People have actually care about our environment. Um, things like global warming have come up, and we've tried to make the environment has kind of come a talking point for politics. Okay, but it is an ideology, and it's something that is, you would say, probably left leaning as well. But they're just going to be specifically advocating for protecting the environment. Don't have a SpongeBob example here, but here's what maybe is an extreme version of a tree hugger. Okay. Um, Fundamentalism. Okay. These are going to be like these very, you should look at this as like right wing, maybe past conservative, almost like what we would consider now as another way to coin it is faith and flag conservative. Okay. Um, Once again, going back to the basics or the fundamental thinking, originalism, okay? It's just more of an extreme right-wing version. It's these doomsday people that say the world's going to end, Jesus is coming, we're all going to hell. It's that type of thinking. One other thing I didn't know, I think that's pretty important. Ideology, so the terms that they use on your quiz or on the survey you'll take are going to be different from the textbook. There's all these niche types of ideologies because people like to break themselves up and make them feel special. Try not to get too confused. Just know liberal is left leaning, conservative is right leaning. Try to think more on those ends. There are more extreme, what we would call like versions of each ideology. Remember, they're not too much different. They either will mean you're being extremely left or extremely right. Somewhere there's minor differences there. Now, terrorism, you should know what it is, both what the international law is or the U.S. law definition is, and then know what domestic terrorism is. Okay, obviously terrorism, it's going to be any political act of violence or way of maybe intimidating or coercing civilian population. There was debate like whether or not the Charlie Kirk incident um, was by definition terrorism, and it might be seen as a terrorist attack because was talking about political values and ideology. Okay, something like assassinating the president is obviously a little bit easier to define as terrorism because why? It's a direct attack on our government, okay, or on a government official. People considered the Luigi guy in New York who killed the CEO. Is that terrorism, right? According to the state of New York, they gave him a terrorist charge, but I think they gave it that to him so they can give him life in prison. But if he did it for a political reasoning, like if you bomb a building for a political reasoning, you kill someone for political reason, you invoke fear for a political reason, it's probably going to be viewed as terrorism. Now, domestic terrorism is a little bit different. By law, this is kind of more of like acting dangerous towards human life. Examples of this, well, this is actually an international terrorist attack. Go look at the Oklahoma bombing, or we can look at 9/11. This is just a video when I went to New York a few years ago, and I had actually had seen the memorial. Don't need to do know that. Just one other thing to talk about. Conservatives tend to be Republican. Liberals tend to be Democrat or blue red states. Okay. Remember though, there can be liberals who are Republican, there can be conservatives who vote Democrat. Okay, but those are just some other generalizations. Political parties and ideology, they're separate from one another, if you guys are wondering. Okay, and we'll talk about political parties in the next chapter coming up. Now, is this good or bad? It's hard to tell. Okay. It's difficult, obviously, when we start to stray away from the middle and it leads to more arguments. It's harder for us to find middle ground. But I don't know if we can define people's values as good or bad. I don't know if it's right. Like, it doesn't seem right for you to be able to tell someone, hey, your opinion is wrong. You shouldn't view that in a conservative way. Or, hey, I get that you're open and you're trying to be more understanding for individuals, but maybe being liberal is being too much of a problem. I think that's a wrong way to think. Remember, there's all types of things that influence our values, our education, our social circles, our gender, our sexuality, our religion, our race, and this. There's so many different factors that influence our geography. Um, it's hard to tell someone when they're wrong, okay, based off of how they perceive the world, okay? So hopefully this helped you understand ideology a little bit well. I knew this was going to be a longer video, but I'm glad I kept it under 25 minutes because this could have easily gone on for like at least an hour if I went into like extreme detail. But anyways, hope you guys are still enjoying the class. Look out for grades will be coming out really soon. Your grade book will get updated, a bunch of quizzes for the rest of the semester, and some instructions for your final paper. You guys have a good rest of your day. Have a good Halloween week, whatever it is, and I will see you guys back on camera soon. And so will Mookie. Kind of woke him up. He was asleep right now. So you guys have a good one.